This is Blaine Scully. Welcome to the Captain's Code. Each week, we talk with the leaders of high-performance teams about the role they play in making a culture of excellence possible. Jack Clark is the head coach of the University of California varsity rugby team and former head coach of the U.S. national team. Now entering into his 37th year as coach, Coach Clark has compiled a 671-95-5 overall record, a record unmatched in collegiate rugby history. He has led the Cal Bear rugby program to win 29 national championships. Also, a former U.S. national team player and rugby and football standout at Cal, Coach Clark was honored as one of Cal's 10 most influential sport figures of the 20th century and inducted into the U.S. Rugby Hall of Fame. His ability to build championship teams has made Coach Clark a highly sought-after speaker, mentor, and advisor to collegiate coaches across sports, as well as to CEOs and executive audiences. Coach, thanks so much for coming on this podcast. It's great to be home here at Cal. Everything I've learned here has been the foundation of not only my professional and international rugby career, but my life as a young man in the world. So I just want to extend that thank you to you and not only for myself, but for every young man who's kind of come through this Doc Hudson Fieldhouse and played on Witter Rugby Field and attended the University of California. So just incredibly grateful to be here with you and have our conversation and appreciate your ongoing mentorship.
Welcome home.
First place to start, I guess, is just a little bit of a background on you and the path of where you are, and if you could kind of just share that a little bit.
Well, I began as a student here in the mid-'70s as a football player, and back in those days, somebody would tap you on the shoulder when football season was over and say, "Come on, time to go play rugby." And that person for me was my best friend still today, Rick Bailey. So I began coaching pretty young after an injury, playing the game, and took the game away from me, and started coaching in 1982, and as an assistant coach, and became the head coach in 84, and here we are today.
Could you walk us through a little bit of that sort of transition? Because I mean, you had a unique experience where blended football and rugby as a collegiate athlete, and then pretty unique experience as well, representing the United States, and then also the World 15 in Carter Farms Park as well. So could you kind of talk a little bit around your athletic career and maybe where you started to get the idea of maybe coaching is something for me?
The connections to American football and American rugby really began in, I think, obviously, we've been playing here since 1882. So, rugby has a long tradition, and, this university was well represented in the Olympic gold medals of 20 and 24. And there was a bit of a renaissance of American rugby on college campuses in what is kind of the, late 60s. And if you think about that time, it's a bit counterculture. It might have been that football players were tired of having, 12 football coaches with whistles up their six, and they gravitated for whatever reason, certainly across the country, but really, particularly, I think here on the West Coast, they gravitated to playing rugby in the springtime. It's this really unique period of time where you see, a sampling of America's best athletes also playing rugby. And we've come a long way. Things have improved quite a bit in rugby, but I don't know that we're as athletic today as probably we were then. It's a bygone era is what it was. But I was really happy to have been an athlete in that period of time where you could play two sports and that so many football players, also played rugby. I think I always knew I wanted to coach. I started off in the financial services industry, and I enjoyed it. I like business. I had a team of people. I was on a team. I led a team. It's rewarding in a lot of ways, certainly financially rewarding, but it lacked the significance, I think, of what I was really looking for. And I would, for 10 years, I would rip off my necktie and I'd rush over to the university and coach the rugby team. And then it just became clear to me that that's really what I should be doing. It's really what I wanted to do, and I would try to make a life of it. And so in the early 90s, I went full-time here at the university, and soon after received the appointment to coach the U.S. team, and began a decade there. But prior to that, I was coaching representative with the Collegiate All-American team. There wasn't there wasn't an All-American team. At that point in time, we had to found the team, and it has been a real privilege is how it kind of feels, coaching here at Cal. And I mean, any time that you get a chance to work with somebody and get them from where they are to where they want to be, I mean, that's a really rich feeling.
Why do you think you ended up choosing rugby as far as we're coaching? Because obviously you had a high level playing experience as a football player as well, and then even some NFL experience. And why do you think rugby was your calling?
Yeah. It's an attractive game. It's not a game for everybody. As you well know, it really does take a melting pot of skills to play the game and play the game well. And that includes decision making, and I was attractive to the kind of the global nature of the game. We're funny as Americans. Tampa plays Oakland, and we call it the World Championship in football, and the rest of the world's just scratching their head, I'm sure, right? You're the ones that play that game. What do you mean it's the World Championship? So I always liked the mark-to-market aspect of a global game, that you could, test yourself on a larger scale. First time I played rugby, I went, this is the most fun game I've ever played. And I suppose, just fell in love with the game.
So you make the transition from athlete in the business world and then back to coaching alongside your former rugby coach and Coach Anderson. And then, also played for, legendary coach at Cal football with Coach Mike White. And I remember you invited to come speak to us when I was a junior here at Cal. Can you kind of talk about your transition back into the coaching, and then your sort of development of what would become your eventual, framework on how you view teams and how you view athletics and how you view the sport as this development tool in addition to doing something really purposeful?
It's a blessing to have good coaches in your life. And I won the lottery in that, right? It started really in youth sports where, I found these really caring people that wanted to help, right? And they believed in you, and God knows we all need more of that, right? And that continued right on through high school. So when I said earlier, I think I always wanted to coach. I mean, it was really based on those individuals. Their mentorship was just so important to me in my life that you want to emulate that. I guess I always knew that's really what I wanted to do, and I think it was based on those people that I now call my friends, right? And they're my coaches, and I'm fortunate to keep all these people in my life now. There has to be a higher purpose to what we're doing other than chasing shiny goblets for the showcase, right? I mean, as much as we all want to be at the top of the podium and we want to win, sport to me was always more than that, right? I mean, it was a chance to have teamship in your life, the people who really care about you cared about them, and you wanted to support and do what you could for them, and all of the real lessons, I think, in my life, came from that arena. I've kind of built a life, if you will, on those values, and it took me a while. I mean, I don't know that I went into coaching saying, hey, listen, here's how it's going to be. I mean, it's been like this really fabulous laboratory to go to work in every day. And you learn a lot. The players you coach teach you a lot. You get to observe and trial things, and when it works, why it worked, and then you want to replicate that for future teams. And then, you flash forward now a few decades, and yeah, I mean, the whole culture of what we do here organizationally, becomes really important. And if you believe like I do that, we're not going to solve any of the big problems in life, with some bright person, really. We're not going to tackle disease and poverty and the environment and just rip through all the big issues. It's going to be groups of people that have really pointed their nose in the same direction and go, through collaboration, go tackle those big problems. And I've always believed that our players here, receiving a PhD in team, they're really learning some proprietary skills around team that, they'll carry with them in their families and in their communities and in their workplaces.
How did you start to identify the values that the team will be built on? I listened to podcasts that you actually turned me on to and talked about Coach Pete Carroll, and he identified, competition is how one of the values of we're going to have as a team. And Steve Kerr, we're going to identify joy in our experience as basketball players and as part of this organization as a key value. So when you kind of looked at how you think about Cal Rugby as a team and the values that are going to make up this group of men, how did you think about that? How'd you kind of boil it down to, like, this is how I want my team to look and this is the values I want it to reflect?
I mean, trial and error, is the real answer, right? I can only imagine in the early 80s what I must have been saying, like, hurry up and try harder, but you learn over time. I just put into words, what I saw us being at our best, which was grateful for everything, entitled to nothing. And it became the mindset, right, of who we are. There's a Latin phrase that's over the doorway into this room that roughly translates into be known by your deeds. There's something very powerful about that to me, players today can talk as well as any player ever has been able to, right? They can explain why and make an excuse or give a rationale, but at some point, we have to be known by what we do. And that's what we don't do, what we say, what our acts are. It took some time to really realize that in order to have a value system, we have to, boxcar a bunch of values together, things we really believe in, and then we have to process all of our transactions through that system so that when, we're having human transactions within the team or even outside the team, that we process them through those values. So we're making value-based decisions and having value-based transactions. And that's as well as the business of the team, the administration of the team as well. We want all of those transactions to represent us. And so it took a while. I have an interest in organizational behavior, so all of this wasn't foreign to me. And I have an interest in it. I have an interest in people that are professionals in this field of endeavor. And so you read, you study, you learn, and you mostly, grab what's right about the team. And then it's kind of packaged. And this is kind of who we are now. And we don't change our core values much, but, we think about them differently as time goes on. Every team is a little bit different and unique. But we're trying to live up to that set of values all the time.
So you have the values, and then, you always say is something that's really important is that we actually speak the same language. So the development of, some of the definitions and just the vocabulary, so we kind of know and understand what we're saying to each other.
Typically within technical purposes, teams use a nomenclature that is all exact and very similar, and that allows us to communicate well with each other technically. But we don't often do that, from a value standpoint and from an organizational and culture standpoint. And it's pretty powerful to do so. It occurred to me that I was in groups of people that were always using terms like leadership all the time, and it's like, and I started thinking about it. Well, if I asked 10 people in the room that just use that term, we'd probably get 10 different definitions for leadership. They'd all be correct, probably. It wouldn't be something you would necessarily disagree with, but they'd be different. But yet we're all using terms like that as if we all have the same definition. So we just decided to create a glossary for something like leadership. We say it's an ability, the ability to make those around you better and more productive. We've taken it away from authority. We've taken it away from rank. It's not something the captain just has, the seniors just have, the coach just has. It's an ability that everybody on the team can have. And it's a pretty powerful concept to think about it that way. And that doesn't suggest that I don't believe in chain of command, because I do. It just means that why would chain of command hijack leadership and make so many other people, I guess, followers, right? And that doesn't ring true to me as being a very powerful culture. It just became important that within the architecture of culture that we didn't just have a technical glossary, we had one for what we really believed in culturally.
So the glossary then kind of defines and informs the building of this idea of a meritocracy in this culture that is about performance, and developing the performance culture that, exactly your point, is Spectrum Agenda, known by your deeds. That is effectively what we're trying to do here. Right. I mean, merit's something we believe in as well. I mean, there's something very powerful about
not falling to seniority or what you did last year or last season. I mean, we that's important, right? I mean, I think the body of your work is important, but in order, for it to be a real currency, it needs to be monetized into performance. So your great last few seasons, that's your intellectual property. You've got to find a way to monetize that going forward for your own success. And I think a lot of times it stands alone. Seniority stands alone. And we don't want that. We'd rather have, if you want your voice to resonate on our team, it's about what you're doing right now. I reckon having potential is a good thing. Not having potential wouldn't be very good. And having a lot of experience is a good thing. But we ought to really celebrate what people are doing right now and what they're getting done. And again, with merit, there's something about no one cares what color your skin is, and no one cares, who you pray to and who you don't pray to and who your daddy is. Man, it's what you can do right now. And there's something really, that is the meritocracies that you reference. And there's something powerful about that.
As a concept, this idea of conditional versus unconditional, which you always kind of bring up. That is it.
Maybe it's just semantics, right? But it seemed like every time I grabbed the newspaper, there was a sports team calling themselves a family. And I think I knew what they meant. I think what they meant was they really care about each other. And I think that's pretty important to becoming a good team, really, really caring about each other. But family's kind of unconditional, right? You can fall pretty short of your best and your family still loves you. And that's really not how high performance teams operate. I think they do care about each other, so I think that part of family is applicable, but there's a lot of conditions. It's not unconditional. High performance teams, they roll a certain way. This is how we operate. And if you want to stay there, that's how you operate, or you need to separate. And, whether it's sports teams or whether it's really high-performing shops in any industry, I think what you find is a lot of conditions. So, yeah, we like to say it's conditional around here, and we're not ashamed of that. But we do care about each other. But we don't throw around the word family very much.
And kind of on this idea of we have all this architecture now that informs how we do or what we're doing, how do we grade what we're doing, and are we measuring up? Where are we today, whether it's training or in competition? How does that process look right for a Cal rugby team?
There's got to be some honest audit of everything that you're doing. Some things you can measure week to week, day to day. Other things maybe are best at the end of the season. But there's an audit process where we need to be reflective of what we're doing, decide, what's really working and how do we leverage it? What do we need to immediately pivot away from? And then what bits are inconclusive and that we have to, use our gut and our best judgment to decide whether it's a pivot or whether we double down. I like to think that a lot of our notational analysis that we do technically tracks back to what we believe in by way of our culture and our values. I believe that we're looking for opportunities to see guys that are getting better. We believe in constant performance improvement, and we're always trying to come back to that and make sure when we get that right, when guys aren't improving, that we take a moment to celebrate that, to make sure that everyone knows, that's where the love goes.
And then this idea of two types of teams, right? You mentioned constant performance improvement, and the measuring of that and the identification of, okay, where are we today?
We typically play on a Saturday, and then on a Sunday we're in the meeting room. It's med check, regen, and then straight into the longest meeting of the week. And I think if you observe that meeting room, you wouldn't know whether we won or lost. Right? You wouldn't know whether, we won by 30 or we lost by 30, because the meeting isn't really about the result. It's really about our performance. And there is something, it's kind of old school that, your results track your performance. It's not the other way around, right? It's not that you get your results right and then your performance is good. And everyone wants to win, and we obviously want to win. But what we have to get right is our performance. And no one ever talks about that kind of stuff. But I think if you study it, I think that's the point. There are teams that are getting better, and there are teams that are not. And there's not much in between. That's the two kinds of teams. And it seems rough, right? It seems like if you have been doing really well for a month into the season, that you should be able to get off the mountain at some point and kind of wander around for a week in some plateau. But it's not the case. You're getting better, you're getting worse. And that reality is strong with us. And so there is a lot of urgency around, let's just improve. If that means we get a victory, great, but let's just get better.
And can you touch a little bit on the idea of, I just finished your 36th season, but only the 6th head coach in Cal rugby history, which is pretty incredible given the duration of Cal rugby as the oldest sport on campus. Can you talk a little bit about, the tough balancing act between, having this really rich cultural legacy, and history, but at the same time being able to, innovate and adapt and evolve as times and, frankly, as young people do?
I think there's something inside all of us that we want to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And I would start with that premise. Sometimes that's a bit of a burden. Right? Cal Rugby's been a good team for a long time. And so might the new players feel some of that burden? I think that they do. And I don't think that's necessarily all that positive. But I also think they feel like they stand on the shoulders of people that went before them. And we have to remember the past to the present. They have to have a good understanding of the people that went before them. And at the same time, when I get into an alumni event, I've got to remember the today to them. They have to understand that the young men we're coaching are just like them, and that they're putting everything that they have into representing this university and this rugby program and their teammates and their families, and it means the world to them. And so, I'm a custodian of all of that kind of mess. and it's our job as a staff to find that fine line to where the people before you tried their guts out. They were brave at the right time, and they put everything they had into this, and we have to do the same thing. That doesn't mean we have to win every time, but we have to give it everything we have. And if we do that, we honor all of that. And we're not the only, team or franchise in sport that has the blessing of that burden, right? And it really is, a blessing. I suppose it's easier if if you're on a team that's never really won anything, and you're going to be the first team that have ever won something. And, I suppose that's a unique experience as well. This is different, and apart from that, but I think it's every bit as rewarding.
I think everything that I've done as a professional international athlete is based on the accumulation of the influence and investment of people like yourself who've put into me as a young person, and you're a hero of mine, and really grateful to share this time with you, and thanks again for sharing your story.
Happy to do it.
As Coach Clark shared, having a clear value system enables high-performing teams to be better and more effective because it's the lens through which every decision is made. To communicate those values, you need to have a common language. Creating a shared nomenclature that goes beyond the business and into the heart of the organization's values is key to building culture. To build a performance culture, Coach Clark believes in the power of meritocracy. Yes, it's important to have a body of work on past performance to draw from, but it's more important to celebrate what people are getting done right now and rewarding that growth mindset. Our team's a family. Good teams care about each other, like family, but great teams care about one another and also consistently challenge each other to pursue excellence. And finally, it's just as important to measure your success. Have an honest audit process where you can be reflective about what you're doing. Capture what's working well and what needs work, making sure it consistently aligns with your team's core value system.